Let's cut some grass with geometry nodes. So I have a blank scene here. I deleted everything just to save time. So I'm going to add a simple plane. So that's Shift A, no, Control Shift A, plane, add plane. Go to Blender, Geometry Nodes, Workspace. You can go other ways, but for simplicity, I just click on that tab. It's already there. Hit New Geometry Node Setup. I'm going to add some points to this plane. Shift A with Distribute Points on Faces. There we go. We got some points. I'm going to add my plane back. Join Geometry. And there we go. We see my plane. I'm going to up the density just a little bit. This can be changed throughout the process. Then I'm going to add a simulation zone. And points into here. Cut that. Points there. And for this to work, I'm going to add another object. Shift A, search circle, mesh circle, mesh circle here. There we go. Then I'm going to go here to a raycast node. Then I'm going to change the ray distance because I want these points to shoot up in the up direction. So instead of -1 on the Z, I'm going to go 1 on the Z. And the ray length can be like maybe 2 meters or maybe 3. It doesn't need to be too high. This mesh circle can be a little bit smaller. Let's go sure that size. Then what I want to do is feed this is hit into here. Then I'm going to go Shift A, add a math node, set to add. So I'm going to add this into here. So the gist of it is I have to add end gun. So there we go. I had to make sure that this raycast was actually seeing faces. So on this mesh circle, I just added that there. And so I want to add this mesh circle here. I want to be able to see it. So actually, I'm going to add a reroute. And then plug it into my join geometry there. Another reroute. Grab. There we go. So should be able to see that. Exit out of that and delete that viewer. Shift A, transform geometry. So that, and now I'm just going to bring it up on the Z. And I'm going to go cavity, I'm going to turn on cavity and both so I can kind of see the object. So for testing purposes, I'm going to animate this object. I'm going to go on the Y this way. Insert single keyframe. Then on the last frame, I'm gonna go like this. Insert single keyframe just so I have some movement. And then click on that, this node, select the keyframes, right click, and then interpolation mode set to linear, just so I have a linear movement. I might actually make that faster, maybe a little more faster. There we go. So this is just for testing purposes. I can always animate something else later, but for the effect to work, this is what I need to do. Then Shift A, search, separate geometry, and then it's on points to the selection. You can see that it's doing things because it's on the selection. So now it's working. And then what I want to do is Shift A, search. I'm going to add a instance on points. Two of them. So Shift D. This is going to go into here. I'm going to move these out. I'm going to cut that. I'm going to move this reroute, grab there. Take this, Shift D. Combine that one there, add my points to that, move this out more, join this to the everything. So to recap, we're animating this object here, adding points, then adding the points to the simulation zone. The ray cast node will shoot rays up, and then if they get hit, it creates this Boolean attribute, and on each frame, that attribute is actually added. So I wonder if we can probably see points. So if we go here, probably see there's probably some sort of attribute, the ID. So if I create Shift A, search, named attribute. Nope. Shift A, search, store, named attribute, and it's a Boolean. Call this hit. So you can see here, I have this Boolean here. So if I hit play, I won't see the thing here, but you can kind of start seeing those get hit, and then they're added. There we go. So that's just to kind of see, visualize the attribute. Then I'm going to add my instance, which is just going to be a curve line. Shift A, search, curve line. And the height, let's go 0.5 for the cut. Oh, that's where I want the points to there, go from there. And then that's my curved line. Shift D. And then for the non-cut, let's go 0.7. These all can be changed. There we go. Actually, within context, those are kind of tall. And then for the cut, there we go. So there we go. Now we have some points. I can up the density on my points. It's kind of hard to see the points in this capacity. So let's add some thickness. Shift. I'm going to change it later, but like go search, and we're going to go mesh to curve to mesh. Shift A and curve circle. There we go. And then the radius is too big. So you can see right now, it's getting cut. So that's basic. That's the basic effect that I wanted to show. And then I can probably animate that to go so it goes that way, and then I better go like here, and then on the X, I can go on the X that way. And then so it's cutting, 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 moving, cutting, 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 cutting. So that is the basic effect. You can do other things. So I want to add some materials to the blades of grass or the object here. So let's add a material. So on this part here, Shift A, search material, set material. Let's go into the shading tab of this object, new, I'm gonna call this grass. I'm gonna go Shift A, search, object info. And then I'm going to use the random output here to a color ramp factor into the base color. Change this to green. Darken it up maybe. Change this to another green. This can all be changed. Maybe I'll make this a darker green. So we have a couple shades of green. Go back to geometry nodes, set this to grass, go to material preview, and you can see each blade of grass is going to look a little bit different. And then I can make that look a little bit better. So now we have grass that is like that. Let's go fill caps. Shift A, search, scale elements. Edge, maybe not. Oh yeah, let's go Shift A, transform geometry. So I can use the scaling factor here. And is it the X I want to go? And that kind of scales. I could go up to 3. There we go. We got some odd shapes of grass. Now what we can do, I'm going to clean this up here. Is use this scale factor. Set that to 1. Shift A, search. We're going to use spline parameter. And then before we do this, I need to add more points because this only has 2 points. Shift A, search, resample curve. And keep it with 10, that works. From the factor, we're going to use a float curve node. Into the scale. And then so what we're going to do here is I'm going to make this into a node group. Control, add that. Go Control G. And maybe not. Nah. We're just gonna leave it like that. So that kind of changed the profile of the grass. Now you can kind of see that the grass is too uniform. Clean that up. And now on the Z scale, I'm going to add a random value. Shift A, search, random value. that. I'm going to go into a combine XYZ. Change that to Z. Change these to 1. And if I click, drag down, I can change values altogether. Now you can see that the cut grass is not so uniform. So I can change the minimum. Actually, yeah, I can change the minimum so it's kind of a little bit of rough. And the max. See, now it looks a little bit like that. And in theory, I can probably just do the same thing to the cut grass, non-cut grass, I should say. Now I want to do the same thing for the rotation. Shift A, search random rotation. And then I'm going to plug that into both. There, and now it looks all crazy. I probably need to do search A, search combine XYZ. Shift A, separate XYZ, and then only plug the Z. And I want to plug into both because I don't want to have different random rotations on each. So I want them to be the same rotation if they're cut or not cut. So you can see here we got that, different kind of colors. Let's add more density. Kind of have to go back. With the simulation zone, if you change something and it's not working, you have to bring the playhead back. So let's up the density so you can kind of see a little more density there. I wonder if my computer should handle that. Yep. So that is a little bit of a basic rundown of adding some basic materials, adding basic rotation. And to create this effect. But the main part is using this simulation zone. So I use the is hit, out, first plug into here, which creates another reroute here. And then basically it hits the, on each frame, it checks if it's hit. If it's hit, it stores that attribute. Then that attribute is a selection for this separate geometry, which separates it into cut and non-cut. And then I'm instancing a shorter blade of grass for the cut and a longer one for the non-cut. Then I'm adding a material after. Then I'm adding some random rotation and scaling just so they don't look so uniform. So I don't want to go into super more detail because I don't want to confuse things, because there's a lot more things one can do, but keeping things simple at the start and then adding more complexity is a good way of going about it. So hopefully this is useful, and take it, explore with it, and see what you can do with it. Thank you.